Syed Saddiq for
Yep.
joining us today.
It's my
Taking
pleasure.
time off.
It's my pleasure.
So Syed Saddiq is of course one of the best debaters in the world right now, and
Very nice
one
of
of the
you.
more vocal critics of Malaysian issues. So when I first met Saddiq 2-3 years ago, you were like a rising star in the debating community, and now you're one of the best in the world. How do you feel right now?
Couple of things. So, I've given my life to debating, specifically to bring glory to Malaysia, to show that Malaysian debaters can compete in the international debate scene. But I think currently, it's time for me to slowly but surely move away from the debate scene, and then to reinvest more of my time towards Malaysian youth activism. I think one thing which is critical and something which I'm trying to persuade my other debate friends to forward is that debating is all about forwarding critical public issues for public interest. And I think that we shouldn't just stop forwarding this interest when we exit the debate room and then we become a normal person again and we do not care about all the issues which are heatedly debated in the debate room. So I think it's timely for me to bring debating and public activism outside of the debate chambers and the debate room, but to ensure that all the things which I've been privileged to learn, to now divulge it towards the Malaysian public and to ensure that youth activism will become much better in Malaysia.
But dissent is not really encouraged in our environment.
Yeah.
And fear and intimidation towards dissent is very real. So,
Yeah.
what do you say to young people? In spite of all of these,
Yeah.
they should still speak up.
So there are a couple of things here. Firstly, even though I encourage the youth to become as vocal as possible, however, I also respect the choices of students and the youth to also choose to remain dormant or to keep their views to themselves, because that's perfectly their right. However, the reason why I would still encourage those who can and should still speak out is because if only a few people choose to speak out, it becomes much easier for any authoritative figure to clamp down on them. So it's like a negative game theory. If you do not, the point in which one person gets clamped down, then others will be fearful to speak up. So the point in which a lot of people start to speak up, it becomes implausible for the voice of the majority to be silenced. So the point which I'm trying to make is that since youth activism and Malaysian national interests which impact each and every one of us, it is critical that we support one another, because if we don't, that means in a way we are compromising our own interests. But assuming that the voices of the few who are vocal do at the end of the day succeed, I think that success should also be played by people like you and me, and we should also play a critical role in the formation of that success. Because if we don't, and those who are vocal get clamped down, I think to some extent we are indirectly complicit, especially when we know that those are the individuals who are fighting for our rights, and if they succeed, we are the ones who directly or indirectly benefit from it. So the conclusion is that even though it is difficult, I'll still respect your choice to remain dormant, but preferably, especially today, at the stage which Malaysia is going through, I'll discuss what this is. It's a very unique stage. It's a stage in which requires some struggle, but if we come out successful, it will be a brilliant day for Malaysia.
So let's talk a little bit about the debating scene in Malaysia. So it wasn't too long ago that reaching international championships was quite unreachable for Malaysia.
Yeah.
But now, just a few days ago, we were champions for Cambridge IB. And you being the first Asian chief adjudicator of Cambridge IB. So what spurred Malaysia so front forward in such a short time?
I think there are a couple of things there. Firstly, I think the Malaysian debate scene has evolved at an exceptional pace. So like, before this will only be like a couple of institutions, or only 5, but now you'll see like almost every single public university competing to become the national champions. The Malaysian government and also some multinational corporations are investing a lot in debating public speaking, sending us to international tournaments for international exposure, and at the end we ensure that the investment will be brought back home when we win trophies on behalf of Malaysia. So I think the competitive level has definitely increased rapidly. I think the second unique part here is that when I first started, again, if you had met me 5 years before this, I was a terrible person. I was like the epitome of an un-Malaysian person. I was a racist, I was a bigot. That was back then. But in a way, the point in which I do not embrace free speech, from the very beginning, it hinders my ability to think critically. It hinders my ability to become a good debater, because a debater also requires to read a lot. It also requires you to know about a lot of things. It requires you to assess arguments critically, and you can't just be a yes man or a person who just denies everything. So you must be a reasonable person. And I think that the Malaysian debate scene is a safe space for critical thinkers. It is a safe space for people to critically discuss every single issue which exists, no matter how controversial it is. And the point in which the Malaysian debate scene evolves, and that safe space harbors more and more critical thinkers, I think it creates a very unique debate scene which assists people like me when I first started. So in the UK, in the US, definitely from like very young age, these individuals who start out early and they already discuss about national issues, sensitive issues, and therefore they always have a comparative advantage over people like me when I first started out. But I think now we're starting to create that parity, the point in which our debate scene becomes more and more open, welcoming, inclusive, and we are allowed to discuss about the most critical and sensitive of issues. I think that's what made me who I am today, and that's also why I believe the Malaysian debate scene is excelling at an exceptional rate today.
What do you think was the secret to being exceptionally
For me, I think some people see this as a problem. I see this as an asset. I'm an OCD person, obsessive compulsive. So like when I have my mind on something, I'll spend as much time as possible. Effort, passion is what drives me to where I'm at today. Once again, usually people say like, oh, you must be like an excellent English speaker. You must be a nerd when you first started out. Like, but that wasn't me. Again, like 5 years ago, I thought Africa was a country. I thought Egypt was a continent. I could barely speak in English, as I did not get A's for my English papers, and that was Malaysian English papers. It's terrible, but then I realized that in order for me to become a much better person, I must become a global citizen, and a global citizen which also is fluent in English. And then that's where I saw debating as one of the easiest platforms for me to improve on my English and also my critical thinking skills and my knowledge base. So that's when I joined the circuit, and I think the passion is what drove me to where I'm at today. So I trade every single day. I read up on like so many articles every day, both government, opposition, international news. I think it is that OCD or that drive which got me here today. And usually the quote which I love to use over and over again is di mana ada kemahuan, di situ pastinya ada jalan. I believe that because again, 5 years ago I would never imagine myself being here today. But passion is what led me to where I'm at now.
But that's exactly coincidental to a lot of people who want to start off in debating, but they think that isn't them. They just couldn't. Either they don't speak well naturally, or they don't like the intense environment. So what do you say to these people about debating?
Firstly, I think specifically the Malaysian debate scene now is the most inclusive debate scene since time immemorial. Like, as time passes by, like, we welcome no matter who you are, where you're from, no matter what background you have, we'll welcome you and we'll treat you like family. And again, when I got in, the reason why I stayed in is because it's not only because debating is fun, because again, I'm pretty sure you know debating is very tiring, exhausting. It is like a lifestyle. You need to read every day and then you debate for 3 consecutive days every weekend. Very tiring, but the point in which you surround yourself with the Malaysian debate scene, individuals who you treat as your family members. So like even after debating, yes, in the debate room you'll argue over and over again, but once you exit, you'll like pat each other at the back, you'll go for coffee, tea, and then you'll eat together, you'll go watch movies together. So I think it's that brotherhood and sisterhood spirit within a familial unit which keeps us together. So I think do join, and we will welcome you. And obviously there are a lot of avenues. You can contact me directly. We also have the Malaysian Institute for Debate and Public Speaking. We have so many debate tournaments, like every single weekend. So at least try to come to one of those and approach any one of us. I can assure you that we'll welcome you with an open hand. So I think that's one. The second part here is that debating, I think debating in Malaysia now, again, as I mentioned before, has evolved a lot. So I think, yes, when you first start out, you might think that there are so many barriers which you need to go through. However, if you join debate tournaments, you'll realize that not everyone are they start off exceptionally good. Like, there'll be a plethora of people from different levels starting off as well. But the point is, you must start out somewhere. And I personally believe that even though you might start out at a disadvantage, however, that passion is sufficient to drive you to become the best in the world. But that passion is what is needed. Because at the end, once you join the debate scene, the Malaysian debate fraternity will bring you to the glorious days which we are currently going through.
Let's talk about politics.
Yeah.
You are a great admirer of Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin and YB Khalid Nordin.
Yes.
What is it that you admire most about both these individuals?
So I think there are three individuals. I think if you are referring to the government, opposition, I also admire some people. But for the government, like YBKJ, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, and also Khalid Nordin, I think especially for the youth today, we like to be we cannot be silenced. We are very critical of issues. Often we do not subscribe to its partisanship at a very young age. So I think the reason why I love these three leaders in specific is because they embrace the culture of open discourse. They believe in open dissent. They do not just simply trample on the voices of individuals. So if you look at MD Khalid Nordin and also Tan Sri Muhyiddin, when back then, before Tan Sri Khalid Nordin became the Chief Minister of Johor, he was the Minister of Higher Education. And also Tan Sri Muhyiddin, before he was deposed from cabinet, he was also the Education Minister. And that was the time in which our coup was taken down and student activism grew to its greatest height, which is today. Obviously, we can improve, but definitely was much better than 10 years ago. So I think the point in which they're able to show that dissent is not a liability, can actually be an asset, that just because we have differing views doesn't mean that our views should automatically be silenced just because it doesn't fit the society or doesn't fit your own personal views. So I think that's one thing which I genuinely like about them. The second thing, I think I've approached all three of them previously, and usually you'll think when you meet up with these people, they'll keep on talking about the party, UMNO. But this is the first time I met with Khalid Nordin, and I have no connections to him at all. I've only met up with him 3-4 months ago. It was a very random discussion. It wasn't a personal discussion. It was he called up the top debaters in Johor to just meet up with him. It was just for dinner. And he specifically mentioned to all of us, it's definitely hit my heart quite well, is that I do not care whether you are a government supporter or the opposition supporter, but the Johorian government will invest in you as long as you would work for the state interest and collectively for the national interest. So, and he specifically mentioned that I will not suppress your voices, that I will treat you for who you are as long as you can contribute towards the country. So I was like, this is very unique. And then at that point in time, I was already vocal, and pretty sure people know that I'm vocal, and yet they still brought me in with an open hand. I think that definitely showed that there is hope within some political figures in the government for change to happen. I'm just hoping that hope will continue and will not be silenced in the future.
So this is something I'm really curious about. You are Johorian, and you have great pride for that particular state.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from Selangor, but
Yeah.
I don't share. I know a lot of people who don't share the same attachment.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a bit more about this Johorian pride towards that?
So there are a couple of things. I still want to stress, just because I'm proud of my state doesn't mean that my love and affection towards my country is diminished. I think military school for 2 years drilled nationalistic values in me every day. But the reason why, especially now, there's a greater affinity for my state, I think one is because I don't think there's ever been a stronger chief minister in Johor now, which I know is working for all Johorians. And if you look his slogan, Muafakat Johor, is always about like assisting the people of Johor regardless of race, class, and ethnicity. So I think that's something which is unique. And then secondly, at the same time, and this is where it gets more political, especially so when Tan Sri Muhyiddin was deposed, I think definitely he was one of the most critical supporters of Johor within the cabinet. So usually people say that the reason why people fall back towards a stronger state identity or state affinity is when they feel least or less represented within the within the federation. So notice how Kelantan feels that way, the point in which oil royalties are given. Sarawak, the same thing as well. I think Johor is going through that phase as well, and especially with the Sultan and the TMJ which we have today. That definitely drives that message through, that you cannot just take us lightly, you cannot sideline our interests. Because if you do not represent us, then this will be the figures who will represent us. So I think it's more like it's not a threat to some nation identity, it's just to ensure that there is a countervailing force to ensure that our interests will be taken into account and will not just be sidelined. But one thing which I want to stress here today, and I hope if my fellow Johorians are listening to this as well, even though I'm a genuinely proud Johorian, I do not think that we should turn our back towards Malaysia. I mean, obviously in the most exceptional and extraneous of circumstances, maybe that's like, I don't know, if like we are completely sidelined, situation is so bad, then that's a different story. But our affinity to the state shouldn't shouldn't mean that we should compromise the affinity which we have to our country. Similarly, people will ask like, oh, are you a Johorian first or Malaysian first? Like, I think that's an unfair question. Similarly, if you ask towards a father who's also married, like, are you a father first or are you a husband first? Like, at times you can be both. I think it's perfectly fine for you to be both. So just never ever divulge yourself from loving the nation just because you cling on to the state identity.
You are also the youngest member of the National Council for Political Funding.
Yeah.
What is it that you do there?
So there are a couple of things. I can't say a couple of things. So usually when this was the chairman of the council is YB Polo. He's an exceptional person. He's a civil servant. It's not a political player. So Malaysia unfortunately has one of the weakest political financing laws in the world. Like, anyone in any country can actually donate money to us, especially if it's not during the electoral phase. So like now, like 3 years before elections, if I'm the Queen of England and I want to donate 5 billion, can just donate. So like our financing laws are exceptionally weak. And I'm not saying that this is a defense of 1MDB. I'm not saying that. I want to make that clear. So the council was set up. Obviously, we were not given the authority and permission to surveil on the 1MDB scandal. That's not for us. But the reason why I still joined, even though we're not given that power, is for us to ensure that prospectively Malaysian financing laws will become significantly better, political financing laws. Because I believe in Malaysia today, the worst form of corruption is not day-to-day, individual-to-individual corruption. It's actually political corruption. That's where billions of dollars worth of contracts are given to us individuals. That's where political players might misrepresent the interests of the public for the interest of money. And this happens in both parties. And I think it is critical that we form a comprehensive political financing framework so that the mistakes which have confronted us in the past will no longer bite us back in the future. I think that's what we are focusing on.
Have you made up your mind on the 1MDB scandal?
Yes, but I'm definitely susceptible to change. So if new facts come out, new testimonies come out, like, I'm definitely up for change. But as of now, I think I've made up my mind. If you want to ask like what the view is, what I'm genuinely disappointed on. If you had asked me this question 1 year ago, I would give you a completely different answer. Because 1 year ago, I was one of the strongest proponents of Datuk Sri Najib. I defended his move to implement the GST. I adored his administration when he pushed for the AUKU to be repealed, for the amendment of the Sedition Act, the repealing of the ISA, and like obviously there are a lot of imperfect actions which happened in between. However, he was still very progressive. But then I think he, like all the reforms which he made, even like he was the one who reformed MACC from 2009, before it was ACC, now it's MACC. But I think he hit his own wall, or he got caught in his own net of reforms. The problem then, when he was caught, all the reforms which he has made throughout his years as a Prime Minister were backtracked. Independence of the MACC, we see continuous intimidation to his MACC officers, the last-minute transfers of 2 officers, and then finally being transferred back, and then the call of internal transfers just recently of the Deputy Chief Commissioner of the MACC. So like there's intimidation there, and AG being kicked out at the very last minute. Obviously they say, oh, it's not kicked out, but pretty sure all of us will be able to assess that on our own. Dissenters within the cabinet getting kicked out, and very, very conveniently kicked out, especially during the height of the scandals. At the height of the scandals, it should be more transparent and open, not silencing individuals on the basis of political reasons. And the reason was because of politics. It wasn't because this is for national interest. So I think all the independence which he has brought to our protectors, to the institutions which will stand for us in the future, will represent the interests of the youth, have been compromised. I think that's where I've realized that the more there are contradicting stories as each day passes by, more information comes out, more silencing of people both in the government, opposition, and also of civil servants. I think that indicates that something is definitely wrong, and I think it's time for something to be done there.
Do you think the Prime Minister should go?
I think, and this is a stance which I've taken before, because I'm not a judge, I'm not the MACC prosecutor, but if you are in a national scandal, and it is a national scandal, like you can't just sideline this, the fact that it has lasted for approximately a year is indicative that this is a national scandal. And the fact that our institutions and integrity of our institutions have been scathed, I think it is critical for him to step down, or at least momentarily step down, and then for there to be a royal inquiry and a royal commission be set up for independent inquiry, so that the point in which the power is no longer there to intimidate and intrude into the investigations which are ongoing, only then will we be able to know whether the outcome of the investigation is genuinely true and neutral. So he doesn't have to, like, if he's genuinely clean and he is not guilty, I think being embroiled in this national scandal, the most strategic and easiest thing to do is to step down and allow for inquiries to happen. And if he is vindicated in the future through those inquiries, then he can get back into power. But at least he gets back into power with the mandate of the public to be seen as a legitimate leader, not a leader which is still embroiled in this national scandal and chooses to cling on to power, intimidate individuals, compromise the integrity of our credible institutions. I think he should step down to clean his name, and if it is not clean, then action should be taken. But if he is able to clean his name, then I will gladly accept him as my Prime Minister.
Your post on the Deputy Prime Minister's daughter was the one that pushed you into the public spotlight. So Malaysian media are even starting to take your Facebook post as the source of their news. How do you feel about being pushed into the public spotlight?
I think it's fine. I think all Malaysians, regardless of their background, should be more vocal, and I also did not plan this. I've always been vocal all this while, it's just that maybe that was uniquely placed. But even then, if you were to look at that post, like, it's not like I was condemning her, saying that she was useless. Like the message was a conciliatory one, that at the end, both of us have the same objective. So let's work together to pursue for free speech and expression in Malaysia. I wasn't like, oh, you're wrong, you're ridiculous. No, like, I think we just have the same interest, and I think we should pursue that. But that statement again was made just to show that anyone can criticize anyone, no matter who you are. The fact that people thought that that was a controversial thing to do, she's not an elected politician, and even if she's an elected politician or a critical public figure, a youth icon, I think that's more of a reason for us to scrutinize every single action of an individual, because the more you are in public spotlight, the more you should be scrutinized. Similarly for me, and I open as many rooms for criticism, because the point in which you are in that position, you should be criticized, because any mismanagements which you conduct will have genuinely disastrous outcomes. So the fact that that was in and of itself controversial is slightly disenchanting, because imagine if that statement was made against the father, the Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia, then what would be?
That leaves you with just one choice, Saddiq, that you have to run for office.
Not necessarily. See where you're pushing me to. In the future, if I am to run for office, I will be more than glad to accept that mandate. But I do not think that being vocal and being to push for public representation, I do not think that the only way is to be a politician. And this is where I hope my brothers and sisters in Malaysia would also take on the path of being more vocal to represent the cause of each and every one of us. Because if we only leave the task of representing the public in the hands of politicians, that means politicians will be exceptionally powerful, that any mismanagements and abuse can happen at any point in time. And we should never forget that even though politicians are our elected representatives, that we are the ones who put them to power. So even though I do not run for office in the future, it doesn't mean that I cannot fight for the public interest. I can set up an NGO, I can join an NGO, I can maybe even become a businessman, but then ensure that the money which I garner will reach back towards the most desperate members of the Malaysian public. So there are a lot of ways in which you can represent our fellow Malaysians. Definitely, running for office is one of the is one of the best ways. But just because someone doesn't have the will or stomach to run for public office doesn't mean that we should stop representing the cause of our brothers and sisters in Malaysia.
Say if you were to run tomorrow,
Yeah.
Which political party do you most identify with?
As of now, it's very sad to say, but there's none. And this is not an easy way out, trust me. And I've mentioned this before, that if I'm asked to vote, and if I can be more clearer here, is that if I'm asked to vote, I'll vote based on who is situated in my constituency. So if they place Rafizi Ramli in my constituency, I'll definitely vote for him, no matter what people say of him, because I think he's representing my interests, and he can represent my interests well. If Khalid Nordin, YBKJ, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, YB Dancy all place my constituency, I'll definitely vote for them. But if Khalid Samad is placed, I'll vote for him. So the point is, I will elect a person based on that person in comparison to the party. I know this is all because people always say at the end the party will dictate the actions of the individuals. That's true. It's partially caused by the place where we're at, Westminster system. Boo-hoo. But I think there is room for change. Obviously, it's very difficult for that change to happen. And we see change not only within the government. We see recently calls for some government members to vote against the budget, but they didn't. Obviously, that's a longer discussion for different reasons. But we also see in Penang where some PKR members are revolting against the DAP-held government. We see individuals in DAP proposing to vote against the extension of the Chief Minister's tenure in office. So we see that there are sparks which are being started, and these are not sparks which will burn Malaysia down. Instead, it will make Malaysia become a genuinely representative country in which individual interest is prioritized over party interest. So I think even though the room is very small now, but it needs to start now, because if it doesn't, the next 20 years becomes much harder. I'm definitely keeping my options open, but that's why, as of now, I prefer to work with members who I genuinely adore and love to make Malaysia a better place. So maybe politics aside first, more on policy outcomes. So I do plan to join YB Khalid Nordin's team. Or because currently I'm working for the think tank owned by the state, by the state of Johor, by Alamana. It's an amazing think tank run by an amazing professor, and I would like to focus on that, just to show that before I join public office, if I am to join, I need to become a technocrat first. I need to know how I can best formulate public policies, and I think working for this think tank or for a minister will help me get to where I will get to. Yeah.
So, if you were to name like 3 of your favorite politicians that are doing all the right things according to your standards, who would they be?
First 2 which will come in mind will be YB Khalid Nordin and YB Khairi Jamaluddin. YB Nancy is like a mom to me, so I'm definitely biased to her. So like, let's put her aside. She's like a mom. You meet up with, she's actually like a mom. I think the third person will be YB Rafizi Ramli. I think in the opposition he should be rewarded a lot more. He's an exceptional person. But those are the 3 people I adore. The reason why I haven't mentioned like Tan Sri Muhyiddin, obviously like if I ask 3 from the government, this would be the 3 people. Khalid Nordin, KJ and Tan Sri Muhyiddin. But I definitely would like to know him a lot more in order for me to assess all the decisions which he has made. But if you ask, because this is me assessing since like I first started reading out politics like 4 or 5 years ago. But I had the opportunity to meet up with Tan Sri Muhyiddin just recently. It was just like a very chill out breakfast. And that's when I realized that he's an exceptional person. Like, again, he didn't mention, not even once, about like, oh, you need to join a party or this is something. No, it's like Malaysia all the way. And then, I mean, it definitely takes so much courage, bravery, and audacity to do what he did, because he could have comfortably transitioned to become the Prime Minister when Datuk Sri Najib steps down, yet he decided to take this route. I think it just shows that courage and bravery is directed for the interest of Malaysia. I think if you ask me for the past maybe 4 or 5 months, he just might be at the top of my list.
So this is our most popular question. Yep. Everyone wants to know about this. What do you look for in a woman? The most
popular. It's hard to say that I just look for one thing. That makes me very shallow, right?
No, what are the things that you look for? What would be most compatible to Syed Saddiq?
It sounds very, very ambiguous, but it's just someone who I can connect to. When I say connect to, usually a person who will not be weirded out when I talk about politics, public issues, national issues. And then, I mean, that person doesn't have to genuinely like it, but will not discriminate me for liking it. I have weird days. Like, people say, like, why you like Selena Gomez? I like it. Like, kittens and cats, definitely is a bonus. But I think, especially with what I'm going through now, is a person who will be able to stick by me when I am to face this bumpy is an understatement, like this uphill battle with whatever I'm going through, and that person is able to understand and stick by me while I go through all the struggles. I think that's something which is often understated, and that's something which I value a lot more now than before.
Right.